So today obviously must be the start of midterm season because people seem to not be here. Either that or it's finally getting to them that this is an 8 a.m. class. But thank you for all of you that are here so that we can get started. Okay, so you got two handouts today. We're actually switching gears today completely. We're moving out of the world of Photoshop into the world of InDesign. You will find as the semester goes on that just as you start to get really comfortable in one piece of software, we move to the next piece of software. And that's unfortunately the nature of the class because I have so much to get through. So we're going to move from Photoshop into InDesign today, and we'll kind of start with a bunch of lectures relating to graphic design. And then we'll obviously learn the process and how to work in the world of InDesign. So you have an assignment that relates to InDesign. It's assignment 103. You're going to be doing a lecture series poster as if a group of lecturers were coming here to DVC to lecture. You're more than welcome to use previous lectures. Usually in the spring there's always a lecture series that the ACE Club puts together, coupled with Daniel. You can use that spring lecture series and the speakers that are coming for that. You can make up your own lecture series. You could have the complete fantasy architect heavy hitter lecture series that's coming to DVC. It's up to you to come up with whatever the content is for that. I'm far more concerned with what the poster looks like than who's coming to speak, if that makes sense. So this is very much about graphic design. We'll talk a lot about graphic design, a lot about layouts, what works, what's successful, what's not successful. We'll talk about type and typography. You know, what font do you choose? All of that stuff is part of what we're doing. That being said, just because we moved from Photoshop into the world of InDesign doesn't mean you can forget everything you learned about in Photoshop. Right? It means that I'm assuming that you will post-process your images and make them look good and all that stuff before you use them in the world of InDesign. Okay? So everything's meant to build on the previous step. So don't just forget all about Photoshop. Remember that that is still very much something that's expected of you to work with. So that's assignment 103. We'll talk a little bit more about it as it comes closer. It is due on the 3rd of October. So you have a little bit of time to work on it. That's kind of the trajectory of where we're going. Today, we're going to talk specifically about graphic design and kind of the basics of design. And it's inevitable that when I lecture on graphic design, I try to be specific to graphic design, but a lot of what I talk about applies to the world of design in general. So whether you're learning to be an architect and an architectural designer, or whether you're learning to be an industrial designer, or you're learning to be a graphic designer, a lot of the stuff that I talk about will end up being essentially the same. Okay? So I'll refer to a variety of different things. I'll try to show you a bunch of graphic design examples so that you get inspired in the world of graphics. But it's very much all in the same thing. So the function of design is primarily the communication of messages, right, through a juxtaposition of words and or pictures. Right? So we want to tell somebody about something, and how do we do that? We use text, we use pictures. That's our primary focus. So you as a graphic designer are responsible for picking the text and the pictures to bring this message across. Right? It is a visual synthesis of thought. Right? You have an idea, you have to come up with a way of sharing that idea and pushing that idea out to other people without being able to verbally speak it. Okay? And that's very much what this is about. Design objectives, if we sat here and I had a blank board and I said, what are design objectives? My guess is that we could come up with a large portion of these. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but at the same time, it's a good start as a list of what are our objectives, right? Big one is communication. Obviously, we're trying to communicate something. You might be motivating somebody to do something. Maybe you're educating somebody. You're trying to teach them how to do something. Right? Maybe it's just pure entertainment value, right? That's certainly one of the options that are out there. So that's not a comprehensive list, but at the same time, it is definitely a list that you could come up with or maybe add to on your own. I'll show you a variety of examples like this that just are nice, clean graphic design. Unfortunately, things get washed out on the projector, so you don't see how nice the text is in composition here, but it is what it is, right? A lot of times graphic design doesn't even matter what language the stuff like the text is in, you can still get a lot out of a specific page, even if it's in a different language, right? Because the graphic design language still very much shines through. So let's talk about establishing function. Okay, if we're going to do a graphic design piece, we need to understand what is the purpose of this graphic design piece, and therefore, how are we going to communicate this? So what is the purpose of the design? Fundamentally, is it an invitation? Is it a poster? Is it a book? Right? Is it a website? Something like that. You have to understand what the end product is before you can start designing for it. Okay? What is our primary objective in doing this? Are we presenting information to somebody? If it's a book, are we trying to teach them something? Is it an educational book? If it's an invitation, what would be the objective of an invitation? Get them to come. Right? Whatever you're inviting them to do, get them to do it. So there is definitely a purpose behind this. There is an objective behind whatever it is that we're trying to do. The other thing is, what is the audience? Who are you targeting? Who do you want to do what you want them to do? Right? Obviously, if it's an invitation and you want somebody to come, the audience is pretty obvious. It's the person that you want to have come to the party. Okay? But maybe it's something that's a little bit less obvious. Maybe you're doing a website and you don't really know who that audience is. You have to kind of figure that out because it'll shape what you do from a graphic design standpoint. And then you have a desired reaction. Right? Obviously, an invitation, the desired reaction is, I'm coming. Right? That's a good thing. It is the designer's responsibility to create strong communicative messages or experiences that support the function of design on behalf of the client and for the viewer. Okay? This is a really good summary, especially because of the end. Okay? And if we look at this very carefully, right, we have a couple key words, right? We support the function of design, so essentially design, right, on behalf of the client, i.e. the person who's paying for it, right, the person who asked you to do it in the first place, and for the viewer, right? That's the person who's looking at it, right? So they can be the same people. You could be working for a client who's also ultimately the viewer, but a lot of times those two things are different. The client is the person who wants something, and the viewer is the person he wants to have do something. Okay, so you want to think about that because it changes as we go forward. So what are some basic designer skills? And again, this is a list that you could certainly come up with on your own, right, or add to or change. But some basic designer skills would include things like analysis or perception, communication, being able to communicate well is important, being able to research things, right? You have to know about it before you can design around it. And we'll talk more about research a little bit later. Management, problem solving, visualization, composition, dialogue, organization. Again, you could come up with this list very easy if we worked on it together. So let's talk a little bit about inspiration. Okay, chances are you've heard people talk about inspiration before. That moment when the light bulb goes off and you suddenly have a new idea, right? That's the traditional sense of inspiration. But the truth is that there is a lot of inspiration that goes on for us that are designers, for those of us that are designers, on an everyday basis. And it might not be that, oh, I have the perfect design, I know where I'm going on my 121 project or something like that. A lot of times it's not that. It's that we are just inspired by good things, by good design, right? By experiencing good design. The number one thing is to be aware of your surroundings, right? You guys are all in a fantastic place because you're in a school where everybody's interested in design and everybody's learning about design all together at the same time. So everybody has all kinds of cool stuff. And they're looking at things and they're saying, hey, have you seen this? Have you looked at that? Have you gone to this lecture? Right? Have you gone to this art gallery? All of those things are facilitating this inspiration. They're keeping you up to date and making you current as long as you're aware of the surroundings. I promise you, this gets difficult towards the end of the semester, right? You've got studio class, you're getting worn down, you haven't slept in like 4 days, right? Does this sound familiar for those of you that have been around before, right? And you have this tendency to put your head down, I'm going to make it to class, okay, I'm here, right? That's not being aware of your surroundings, right? You have to keep your head up. You have to look at what's going on because there are so many little things that matter that can help you out, right? How many of you have stared at these tables in that much detail before? Probably not. Right? Anybody looked at them in great detail? Okay. These tables that your computers are on were custom built for this classroom, designed by Daniel and myself, right? Trying to get the exact right proportions and fit and finish and look, right? So they are a designed object. They're something that you've interacted with on an everyday basis. Look at how the computers are held in place, right? There's a little bracket that locks the computer in place that you can't even see. You go into another computer lab on campus, right? You see the big cables that are tying things together, right? That's ugly. So if you pay attention to design, there are a lot of things that turn out to be really sexy in life, right? We love to use the word sexy, right? If something is sexy, that's really good. Okay? So we're in a really lucky place right now too, because so many of the things that we interact with, design is now a priority. Okay? And I'm going to go back in time a little bit. Some of you were probably like not born yet. It's scary. Right? Computers have come a long way, right? Way back when we didn't have iPhones, right? We had like, I know, shocking, right? We had like Nokia 5190s, right? That were like big bricks, right? And people had like belt clips and they clipped them on and they were like, I'm cool, right? Okay, and then the Razor came out and it was like, oh my God, this is so thin, it's amazing, and it fits in my pocket, right? And it was like, okay, that's kind of cool. But if you go back and you look at the Razor and you open it up and you're like, wow, this is really chunky, the screen's really blurry, right? Things have come a long way, right? Along comes the iPhone. Along comes Steve Jobs, okay? Transformative technology, right? We start to all interact with our smartphones and whatever. We've gotten to the point now, though, that it's not just the smartphone. It's not just that I can browse the internet. I mean, heck, you used to be able to browse the internet on BlackBerry, but it was really ugly, right? The truth is that now you have an industrial designer like Johnny Ives who works for Apple, who thinks about the typography that goes into your phone, right? How thick are the fonts, right? What's the placement? All that graphic design is constantly inundating us, right? Which is really, really cool. It makes us think things are pretty, and that's important. So there is inspiration all around you, right? You should always be aware. You should always be looking at things, right? That's kind of the biggest thing that you can do. It's frowned and transformed into tangible objects, but the other thing is it's different for everyone, right? Some people have a different aesthetic. They like certain things, right? Naturally, you gravitate. You're inspired by some things, not others, okay? For me, I love materials, right? Building materials. So when I walk around, I'm always looking at concrete and brick, right? And wood, and what's the wood grain look like, and how did somebody assemble that, right? This is just something that I'm interested in, so I'm always paying attention to that. You have to find whatever it is that you're interested in and start to study that and look at it and be aware of it, because it will inspire you. It shouldn't be hard to be inspired. You're in a design field, you should love this stuff. Like, this is the best thing ever, right? We always joke, at least when I was in college, right? Again, we're going back into the dark ages, pre-iPhone, right? When we go back into the dark ages, right, we always joked about, wow, you're an architecture major. You know, boy, you stay up a lot, right? And it's like, yeah, but you stay up and you write papers, and I get to stay up and build models and draw pictures. How awesome is my life, right? Your life sucks. Can you imagine writing a 20-page paper on history or something? Ooh. And I just get to draw pictures and build models, right? So it's all about what is exciting for you. What do you like to do? Right? It shouldn't be a chore to do what you're doing. If you're in this field, you should do it because you love it, not because you think you're going to get paid a ton. It comes from a desire to create or communicate, right? Everybody in this room, you wouldn't be here if you weren't like this. You like to create things. You like to draw. You like to come up with ideas, right? That's the nature of the field that we're all in, okay? Don't forget to look toward yourself and tap that inner inspiration, right? Sometimes, some people really like to draw. Some people really like to paint. Whatever it is that is creative that you like to do it. It'll make you feel better, right? Find time to do that sort of thing. So you want to collect your inspiration as best you can, right? How many people carry a sketchbook with them on a daily basis? Right, good. Good, that's fantastic. When I was in school, I carried a sketchbook on a daily basis. Absolutely. Okay? When you get out of school and you get into the working world, you get a little lazy and you don't always do it. Okay? Such is life. However, there's a lot of new digital ways of doing this. Right? We all carry our phones with us. They all have cameras built into it. If you find something that you like, take a picture of it. Right? It's a great way of remembering and thinking about the stuff that's inspiring to you. Okay? So just because you don't have a sketchbook doesn't mean you don't have your phone. I would highly doubt that any of you go anywhere without your phone. It's very rare. So you have a camera and you could take pictures of things. Right? Write notes, make drawings, etc. If you're comfortable drawing digitally, draw digitally. Right? That's fine. It's a great way of keeping track of stuff. Okay? So how do you nurture this inspiration? Carry a notebook, carry a sketchbook, carry a camera. Those are great ways of doing it. Collect stuff that looks cool. Right? If there's little paper things that look cool, stick them in your sketchbook. Right? How many people tape stuff in their sketchbook? Good. That's great. There's nothing better than taping stuff in your sketchbook. Okay? Commit to discovering new and inspirational factors. Try something new. Right? Go to a different lecture. Those are great ways of doing it. Communicate with other designers. And I think this is one of the things that you're so lucky, but you don't really understand how lucky you are. You're in school with all these other people that are doing design work all the time. Right? When you get out in the real world, you're stuck with just a few people who do design work. Right? You work in a firm, maybe there's 4 or 5 people that you work with. You see all of those people and that's all you do. Right? One of the reasons I absolutely love teaching is because I have 60 of you. Every semester, I get to see what you do. That's inspirational, right? So take advantage of the fact that you're with a lot of other people doing the same kinds of things, right? Sometimes you're stuck. Anybody ever felt stuck before? Like, I don't know what to do. I'm not inspired. I just don't have any energy, right? You need something different. Go out and take a walk. Get some fresh air, right? There's these tricks. Listen to some music, right? Depends on what kind of music. Might be helpful, might not be. But a lot of times it's useful. Explore other areas of interest. If you have a passion or something, take a break, do that passion for a little bit, come back. That'll make a big difference. Go to lectures. Right? There is a lecture series in the spring every semester here. Hopefully you guys have gone in the past if you've been here more than one semester. Right? For those of you that are new, go to the lecture series. You get passionate people coming in and talking about the stuff that they do, and that inspires you. Right? That's a good way of getting unstuck, is seeing what other people are doing. Right? Explore, try something new. Right? And there's also other kinds of tricks, like go brush your teeth. Right? It's just shocking. I don't know. It always worked for me. Like you got really, really tired in studio and you couldn't go anymore. Right? You go brush your teeth and suddenly you're awake. I don't know. It always worked. So you'll figure out those things on your own. Inspiration is always the first step toward the final design. You have to have that to move forward into your final design. So let's talk a little bit about the design process. So what is this process? How do we go through it? Right? And I'll speak specifically to graphic design in this sense. But it works similar in the architectural world. Okay? So let's go through all of these in detail. Right? Couple things before we start. You can't skip steps. Right? A lot of times people in the design world want to jump to the end. Right? Design is fundamentally an iterative process. You have to try and fail, and try and fail, and try and fail before you get to that really good end. And that's just the nature of it. That's the way we work in the world of design. You can't focus on the final product. You can't say, I know what I want, and I'm going there. You have to try a lot of stuff along the way and focus on what you're doing along the way. Right? Design is fundamentally an evolution. There's no question about it. Right? Every step that you do has to have your full attention. You have to really focus on those steps. It can be totally exhausting. You will feel completely exhausted at the end of the semester. I can almost promise you that. Right? But it's also one of the most rewarding, cool things. When you come up with a great design and it just sings, it's awesome. And that's why we do it. Okay, so we're going to start with the project brief, or the program. And you guys may have experienced this in your architectural studios thus far. Basically, this is an overview of what is desired and what are the parameters for that desire. Right? It's an overview of the project. It addresses the design in detail and every aspect of the problem that you're trying to solve. Okay? It defines the roles of you, the designer, the client, right, and the viewer. If I were to translate this in the architectural sense, right, you, the architect, your client, a lot of times your client and the viewer are the same thing, right? It's the person who's living in the house, right? Sometimes it's different. Sometimes your client is a developer and they're going to sell the property. Your end buyer is different from the person who's the client. So you have to be aware of that because it will make a big difference. Okay? So when we get into this program, we're going to begin with the information that's given to you by the client. Right? This is going to vary greatly depending on who the client is. Right? So for example, you guys all have your assignment 103s in front of you. It's a lecture series. Okay? In this case, I'm the client. I'm giving you the project. Okay? I gave you very vague information. You figure out who the lecturers are, and you figure out how to present it. Okay? So I didn't give you much. On the other hand, if you were working for somebody that said, oh, I want you to design and build a website for me, right? That person may be very specific about what they want as the end product, right? So it's going to vary greatly. You need to clarify and simplify whatever the person has given you so that you can actually use it. Okay? Maybe you're given, you're in 220, and they give you the first program, which is an architecture school. You get that information, you have to simplify it. You have to figure out how that fits into what you're trying to do. That's your job. Okay? It is your responsibility for asking questions, clarifying, finding out what this client really, really wants. That's your job. You want to define primary goals and messages to be expressed. Right? What's the goal in doing the poster? To get people to come to the lecture. Right? So that's the goal. How are we going to express that? Okay? Define restrictions. Right? In this case, there really aren't any restrictions because you can come up with whoever you want and there isn't a budget for it. Okay? But in the real world, most often the restriction is budget. You're doing a new kitchen remodel for somebody. You have to understand how much money they have to go into this project so you can design around that. And it doesn't do you any good as the architect or the interior designer that's doing the kitchen to do a project, $300,000 kitchen, when the people have $25,000 to spend on their kitchen. It doesn't work. So you need to understand that and work within that context. Okay? Define a timetable for completion. Well, sometimes this is given as a deadline. So in this case, there's a deadline, October 3rd. Better be in. Right? Other times you need to kind of figure it out and you need to talk with somebody. What is the deadline? What are you shooting for? Okay? And then you have to define who the audience is. So in the case of this lecture series, who would the audience be? Students, right? Somebody that you want to have come to the lecture. So then we move into the gathering phase, right? This is when you're trying to collect stuff. Okay? Photographs, text, who the lecturers are, right? What are they going to lecture on? How are you going to form the poster based on that information? So you try to collect everything, right? Pull it all in. If anything's missing, you need to request it. And this is one of the things that designers often, especially in the graphic design world, struggle with, right? There comes a point in time where you're trying to design something, maybe it's a magazine article layout, and you've figured out what the photos are, right? It's not your job to write the article in the first place. You're waiting for somebody else to write the article and get that information. So sometimes you have to hound people and say, I need the article so I can figure out what it looks like. Right? So you have to get whoever is doing the work to give it to you, which can be very, very important. Then you move into research. Okay? It's really hard to design around a topic if you don't understand the topic in the first place. So you need to read all the information. If we're in the graphic design sense and you're designing the cover for a book, for example, well, guess what? You better read the book. Right? It's important to do those kinds of things to be competent and to really understand what's going on. Independently research additional information. Right? One of the coolest things about architecture is that you're constantly going to be given different design projects. Right? You're in 121, you're given 2 museums. You move into 220, you get an architectural school, right? Maybe a housing project, right? We're always giving you different things to work on, right? For some reason, when I was in school, it was always archives and libraries. Like, we did so many archives and libraries. It's like, I'm done with archives and libraries, all right? But maybe it's housing, right? I don't know. The cool thing about the world of architecture is you get to become an expert in all of these subject matters, right? Somebody wants you to design a zoo. Guess what? You get to learn all about zoos. It's really cool, right? Somebody wants you to do a museum. You get to go to museums and learn about museums, right? Somebody wants you to do a theater. Well, you better go in the back of theaters and learn all there is to learn about a theater, right? That's the cool thing about it. You get to learn all of this information. Right? So it should be fun. That's the idea. You want to review the client's current communication materials. Right? If you're designing for a client or for a company, they probably have a logo. They probably have a color scheme that's already established. You want to stick within that logo and color scheme. How do you use it? That sort of thing. Investigate competitive markets. And is there anybody else doing the same thing? Right? Are there books similar to the book that I'm writing or designing a cover for? What do those covers look like? Right? There's a reason that all the romance novels out there look the same, right? It exudes romance novel, right? That's the nature of it. So you want to understand what those competitive markets are and what are they doing, so you can exploit it or do something to the contrary. Then we move into brainstorming. Okay? This could be just sketching, right? Probably primary is just sketching. But it could be a lot of other things. Could be listing, could be mind mapping, whatever it is that works for you in this particular context, right? Then we get into conceptualization. And this is really where you first start doing some real work, right? This is where you try out. This is you have different plans, right? You figure out what the thematic link is between the design and the delivery. You start to come up with your ideas, you start to sketch them out, you start to kind of see how this all pieces together into a real design. We move into experimentation, right? We change colors, we change background images, we change fonts, we work through all of those things to come up with this is the best strategy for presenting this particular information, right? When you feel like you've completely exhausted it, try something new, because that new thing may be better than everything you've done before, right? Well, I was in a studio at Berkeley in grad school, and we were designing a America's Cup sailing facility. It was a really fun studio, cool concept. Okay, I spent the entire semester designing a building that was a cube. That's about as simple as it gets, right? It's a cube, nothing else. It's a cube. And I worked so hard on that cube. And at the very end of the semester, I had my final review. Everything was good. And I sat down with the instructor the day after, and she said, "Are you ready to move on from the cube?" I said, "Yeah, I exhausted the cube." Right? And so that's the nature of it. You want to focus and push and push and push until you can't push anymore. Right? And then you're ready to move on. That's the nature of design. Okay? And then it gets down to the execution phase. And this is really fun. This is the final presentation drawings. Right? Get the best ideas from all that experimentation. This becomes the final set. You want to examine every detail. And this next one here is probably the most important thing that you as a student can learn. Right here. Right? Divorce from attachment. Okay? You work so hard in the design field by your nature that you get really invested in whatever it is that you do. Okay? Your heart is in it. Right? And when you come into the final review, and some person comes into the review and they take the roof of your model and they pull it off, right? Your instant reaction is, "What did you do?" Right? They tear off a couple little columns. Right? Anybody had this happen before? I have. Right? I've actually done it too. That's the fun thing about being an instructor. You get to flip the tables a little bit, right? You have to find a way to divorce yourself from that attachment. And it's really, really hard because you have so much energy and emotion that's tied up into your work. But the best way to learn is when you can take a step back. So when it comes to that review, you present your information, step back from it, and try to learn everything there is to learn from the person that's talking to you about it. Right? They have more and different experiences. They might have that idea that you were looking for that you just couldn't find that takes your project that much further. And if you're hung up on focusing on, oh my God, this is my best project ever, and you're ruining it, you won't listen and you won't hear what they're saying. And you won't become a better designer for it. So you have to be able to step back. And it's really hard, and it takes a long time to get there. It took me until grad school to really get there, right? Because then you can step back and you can say, okay, I'm ready to learn. Right? The other alternative that's really useful, and when I taught 220 a while back, I made every one of my students do this. Find a partner, find a friend that's in the class with you, and ask them to take notes for you while you're presenting based on everything that the reviewers say. Because then in the moment, when you react and you panic because they're tearing apart your model and you can't listen to what they're saying, your partner, your friend, or whatever is writing down notes of everything they're saying. And you can go back 2 days later when you're like, okay, I've recovered and I've slept and I can actually concentrate now. And you can read all those notes and you can learn a lot about what these people are trying to say. Okay? There's a reason people devote so much time to their reviews, and the reviewers come in and volunteer their time and don't get paid and are there talking to you because they want you to be a better designer. And they're trying to teach you that. It's a really good learning experience. Analyze objectively. Go back, read the project. Did you actually solve what you were supposed to solve? It's kind of important, right? And then you produce that final draft of the project. Intuition. Okay? Trust your inner voice. This is one of the more challenging things to talk about. But no matter how much you're in this field, you can learn the fundamentals. You can learn the skills. You can be in both of my digital tools classes, and you can understand how mechanically to do everything, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean you have a good design. Okay? If it was the case where the technical skills were all that was necessary, we could have a computer do the design work for us, right? Because we could teach a computer or an artificial intelligence system what these fundamental skills are, but that's different from good design. Okay? So good comprehension of techniques does not equal good design. No matter how good you are at post-processing your photos, right? If you don't understand good compositional techniques, the image is never going to be that good. And that's the nature of it. Intuition is a different level of thinking. Anybody been in a review where the reviewer has sat there and been like, yeah, it just doesn't feel right? Anybody had that happen before? Maybe. Okay. If it hasn't happened to you, it will happen. Right? That is this intuition thing. It's the complement to your rational thinking. It's the stuff that goes on in the back of your mind. Right? It's the little person that sits on your shoulder and barks at you. Right? Or maybe not. Right? It should come naturally. It can't be forced. As soon as you try to force it, it becomes rational thought, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do. It allows for thoughts that would not normally come out through a rational thought process. It's the off-the-wall weird idea. And we have to have that to complement. Right? It's for guidance. It can be for protection. It can say, oh, no, that's not a good idea. Right? It can be for inspiration. It can be for enlightenment or synthesis. Your intuition fundamentally cultivates your imagination. Right? It allows you to move beyond your traditional comfort zone. And that's important, right? We ask you to think outside the box, or any one of those cliches. This is what we're talking about. It's that intuition for this feels right, right? It often leads to the fresh and innovative solution, right? Somebody had to think outside the box to come up with the idea in the first place. And so they were trusting and they were taking that leap of faith. It increases the number of ideas that you come up with, okay? And it provides that final spark to push you forward. Sometimes you need that. Right? You must allow it to actually surface without worrying about what the final product is or whether the idea is stupid or not. Right? All too often we have this intuitive idea of, oh, I should do this. And then your rational thought comes in and says, oh, no, that'll never work. That's too hard. It's not worth it. Okay? Well, as soon as you say that, you haven't let the idea mature, and that might be the golden idea. So you need to let that part come out. Right? It takes time to believe that your instincts are actually valuable. So you guys are all very early in your design careers, and it's hard to have that much faith that, oh, I'm going to do it. Right? It's going to work out. Right? What this intuition is telling you, though, is that you're standing on the cliff, right? And you're thinking about, I could do this idea, and I could plummet to my death, or I could start to fly away, right? And you have to take that step. It's safer to stay on the cliff and do what's comfortable, right? But in the world of design, the best people are the ones that take that leap, and they take that step, okay? And it's really important that you learn to do that and you believe in it, okay? So side note about this particular class, okay? Number one, I have in the grade, grades are always important, right? You guys all care about your grades, right? You all want to get an A, right? That should be the case. You wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case, okay? It's actually really interesting. I'm going off on tangents, I'm sorry. When you're in grad school, it's the first time that grades don't matter because it's the end of your degree. It's like you get a grade at the end of the semester, like, you got an A, maybe. You got a B, whatever. It's really cool. Anyway, so in this particular class, right, because you all care about your grades, it's hard for you to be willing to take a leap or take a risk, okay? But I have set up a bunch of things so that if you take that leap and you plummet because it didn't work out, guess what? You can regrade. You can submit it again. Fresh start, no problem, right? So I will tell you right now that I will never, ever penalize your grade because you took a leap, right? I want you to take a leap. Do something outside the box. Try something new. That's important for you, right? Now, you have to be aware of who your instructor is, right? If I was teaching 220, for example, or 121, I would absolutely be encouraging you to take those leaps because I think it's critical that you do it, right? Different people teach different ways. They might not want you to, right? They might punish you for it. So you have to be aware of who's teaching, right? But I'll tell you right now in this class, take a leap, you will be rewarded. You will do better. The best ones always do, okay? Don't prejudge or abandon your ideas without letting them come through, right? If you prejudge and you say, oh, that's stupid, it's never going to turn out. You didn't let it happen. It might have been the best idea in the class, and you didn't let it come out, right? So you got to do that. It's not always useful or appropriate, right? You might come up with that off-the-wall idea, and you let it come to fruition, and you say, no, that didn't really turn out, right? That happens. We all have those ideas too. Don't be afraid to take risks, right? Risks are how you succeed, right? It's the same thing in life, right? You have some money, you want to take an investment. Do you put it in a risky investment? You could succeed huge, right? Do you put it in a safe investment and not earn very much money? Maybe that's better. You have to think about what's right for you, right? In the design career, taking the risk is huge. You have to do it. And you do that by trusting your intuition. You listen to that inner voice, you react to it, and you move on from it. You want to expect the unexpected, right? It happens at weird times, right? You might come up with some idea and you're sitting in the shower, right? You start drawing on the shower door. Wait, steam, don't cover it up, right? I don't know, that happened to me, right? Don't overanalyze. Record your ideas. Put them in your sketchbook, right? So elevate your designs. Okay, so I'm going to close this part and then move on to the world of InDesign with a quote. And I think this is really, really important quote, and it's well said. In the design process, there are things that you think about rationally, those that you learn about, and those that you're looking for. And then there's this most interesting part that you cannot be rational about. You just feel it for some strange reason. It feels right, right? If you feel right, it will fit into the concept perfectly, and it will make your design more interesting and more unique, right? It feels right. You have to trust that gut reaction, okay? So let's move, as they start hammering on our roof, into the world of InDesign. So give me a second to switch over, and we'll continue. So as I said, we're going to move into the world of InDesign from the world of Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and open up InDesign CS6. And I will warn you ahead of time that if you download Adobe's Creative Cloud on your own computer and you work in InDesign, the files are not compatible with the version that we have here, right? So you have to be really aware. There is a way of saving your file. If you export in what's called an IDML file, it'll go backwards. But it's the only way of doing it. So Don't work a bunch at home and then expect to open it on the home computer. Bring your laptop with you if you decide to work in Creative Cloud. It's unfortunately one of those sticky situations. So let's talk through the world of InDesign a bit. I like to give you an overview of what's going on in our particular world here. First thing that I'll do is this little splash screen has a tendency to come up when you start up InDesign. We're going to create a new document. It's very rare that you would do a book or a library. So we're going to stick on document. And when we click on document, we get this little new document dialog box that pops up. And in it, we have some options that are available. You may or may not have everything showing. It doesn't matter. We're not going to worry about that so much. But right up here, we have a document preset. Right? This would be if we saved a bunch of documents and we used the same kind of document over and over again, we could pick from it. For right now, we're going to stick with an intent to print. Generally, we're doing graphic design stuff. It's going to be a printed format. Number of pages, 1. Facing pages just means do you have 2 pages that face each other. Right? So I have a book, right? And I open the book. I have a page here and a page here. Okay? For the poster, we're not doing anything with facing pages. When you get to the portfolio, chances are you will have facing pages. So we'll talk through that when you get there. So let's uncheck facing pages. Our page size, right? Letter is the default. You'll notice that down below here, there's something called compact disc. That's what we're designing today. We're designing an album cover, so we're going to pick that as our size. Right? You'll also see that under width and height, it says 28p4.157. Okay? Does that mean anything to anybody? No, probably not. Right? It's in a layout unit called a pica, which is something that like magazine companies use as their layouts. So for us, it doesn't really mean much. We will switch the units a little bit later on. So we're going to trust that those units are correct. Right? We could manually type in 4 space IN for 4 inches. That would work as well. But for right now, we'll just leave it like that. Columns, we don't need anything special in the columns. The margins, however, I'm going to go ahead and set at 0. So I'll type in 0 in the first option. And when I press Tab, right, to move on, or if I click into one of the other options, you'll see that all 4 will turn to 0. The reason that they all turn to 0 is there's a little chain icon that's clicked. Okay? With that chain icon clicked, they'll all be the same. So they're all set at 0. So I'll go ahead and say OK at this point. And that then brings up my page. Okay? You see that we've got a border that goes around the page. There's a little bit of a drop shadow on the bottom and on the right side. That indicates this is the page that I'm working with. Okay? And it fills the screen. Again, we have a ruler that's up at the top here, and it's in some kind of units that don't make any sense to me. So let's go ahead and change those units before we move on. There are 2 ways of changing units. If you go to where the 2 rulers cross in the upper left corner, right-click, you can switch to inches. And now it starts to make more sense. So there's 0. We go up to 4.5, 4 5/8, something like that. Okay? So that makes a little bit more sense intuitively. The other option would be to go to Edit, and then Preferences, Units and Increments, and you could specify it here. But to me, right-clicking in the corner makes a whole lot more sense. It's a little easier. Okay? So let's talk through the InDesign interface so that you see, by its nature, it's written by the same people who made Photoshop. It looks kind of similar to Photoshop. Right? So at the top, we have our standard file menus. Right? Most things are available through those, in addition to through a bunch of buttons. Okay? I'll reference those as we go forward. Below the file menus, we have a ribbon that changes, just like in Photoshop. It's contextually aware to whatever tool you have active. You get different options. Right? So for example, right now I have the selection tool active. I get information about selection. If I were to switch, say, to the type tool, we see that I get information about text. Right? So that contextually aware ribbon is always going to be changing based on what tool we have active. On the left-hand side, we have a variety of tools that are available to us. Right? We're going to be working primarily with this tool right here. It has an X. It's a rectangle with an X on it. It's called the Frame tool. We'll work with that a little bit later today. There's also a Transform tool that's very useful. as well. And then we have a border color and fill, just like in Photoshop. The difference is in Photoshop we have a foreground and background color. Here we have a fill color and what's called a stroke color, which is the outline color. Okay? And we'll talk through that at far more length. On the right side over here, we have some default windows that open. I have something called Pages that opens up the Pages menu. Right now we only have one page, so we don't really need to worry about that. We'll get to multi-page documents a little bit later in a week or so. Below that we have layers. They work like layers in Photoshop. For the most part, you can do almost everything on one layer. There are a few times where layers are valuable, and I'll tell you about that as we go forward. Right? We have something called links. And this brings up a very important thing about InDesign. So unlike the world of Photoshop, and unlike the world of Illustrator for the large part, InDesign is built around referencing and linking to other files. So rather than have a really, let's say we had a 100-page document, right, that was in InDesign, and every page had images on it or whatever, that file would get really, really big if everything was included in the InDesign file. But for speed, what InDesign does is it says, okay, I want to put this image in. It's called placing. I want to put this image in. It's here. And when it comes time to export, it says, okay, let me go find the original file, get the full-size version, and put it in. Otherwise, it shows us just a preview of what we're seeing. Okay? So it's a referenced file structure. So sometimes you lose an image, or the location changes, or you move a file. This links window will let you go back to relink it to your original file, etc. Okay? And again, all of this we'll talk about in more depth. Below that, we have stroke. This would be the outline. Do we want it to be dotted or have a specific line weight, etc.? We have a color, and we have a swatches menu. Again, those are less important for right now. So I ask you today to create an album cover. Okay? That album cover can be for any artist that you want. You can pick your favorite artist. You can pick your least favorite artist, whatever. Right? It's kind of interesting because it's fun to see what people pick for their various designs. So if you were going to do an album, right, let's go ahead and find, I'm going to go on to my Creative Commons search. And I'm going to look for some images. Maybe. Maybe not. I can't type today. It's probably already loaded for all of you guys, right? Okay, so let's say I pick an artist. I don't know. I'll pick Garth Brooks. How about that? Okay. Anybody ever seen him in concert? Right. He was gone for like 17 years, out of touring, and he went back last spring. And my wife was like, "Oh, I really want to go see him," and I was like, "All right, we'll go see him." It's the best concert I've ever been to. He was absolutely incredible for an old fat guy. He was awesome. Right? He was absolutely awesome. So if you ever have the opportunity, right, it's totally worth it. It's like your one opportunity in life to go wear a cowboy hat and act like an idiot. It's great. Right? Anyway, so let's say I'm going to do his latest album, or a new album for him. Okay? Maybe I want to do a background of like some kind of tractor in a field or something. So let's try tractor, field, something like that. And again, I'm making this up on the fly. Okay? So again, because I'm doing this, right, I want to be a little bit careful about what image I pick, because compositionally it's going to matter. Okay? So I was thinking it was going to be a tractor in a field, but I kind of like this image. I think it would work nice for an album cover. Okay? So now that I kind of like that image, let's go ahead and download that image. And once it comes down here, we're going to go Show in Folder. Let me copy this. And let me go into today's folder. Oops, sorry. It's over here. There we go. Let's paste it here. All right, so there it is. So as I said before, InDesign works by referencing other files. Right? So I found the image, I copied it, I put it in my folder. Right? Now when I go to put the image in, I'm going to use this what's called a frame tool. And so you see over on the left side here we have a rectangle with an X in it. Right? That is a frame tool. And I will draw a box, and I'm just going to draw it the full size of the page. And when I draw that box, it gives me an empty frame, so a rectangle with an X in it. With that frame selected, I'll go to the File menu, and I'll go to Place, and I'll go find that file that I just downloaded. So let me see here. It's under the frame tool. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay? So I go right here. It's a rectangle with an X. I click on that. I draw it, and it gives me a rectangle with an X in it. Okay? So after I placed it, right, I get a preview of the image. So you see when I put that image in, see how it's pretty blurry? Okay? This is by design. So InDesign gives us a stripped down version of the image that's enough to kind of vaguely see what the image is about, but not too much information. Okay? So let me make some modifications to it. If I right click on the image, excuse me, I have to select it. If I right click on the image and I come down here to a menu item called Fitting, right, I have some options. So right here I have Fill Frame Proportionally or Fit Content Proportionally. So fill frame proportionally, this first option here, will take my image and make it fit in the frame, but will cut off, because my image wasn't a square, it'll cut off parts of my image. So let's go ahead and fill frame proportionally. Right? And so we see that, okay, my image fits in the frame now. That's nice. But let me just show you for a second here. My overall image, right, goes off outside of my frame. So see how it's cut off because my original image wasn't a square. Okay? I could, for example, move this image over and have a different part of the image showing, depending on which part I wanted to have it show. Right? Maybe something like that. Okay? The other option I have, if I select it, hold on a second, right-click, Fitting, right? I could fit content proportionally. And when I fit content proportionally, it will fit the entire image inside of my frame. So you see that now the whole image fits inside, but I have a white bar at the top and a white bar at the bottom. Right? So there are different options, whether I want to see the whole image or I want to have it clipped but have it fill the frame. Right? The other thing that we can do under fitting, below those top two, we can fit frame to content, which, for example, if I went to fit frame to content, my frame would get smaller and match up with my image in this case. Or if we come down to fitting, right, I could fit content to frame. It will fit, but it'll stretch the image, which may or may not be desirable depending on your image. Okay? And our last option, right, would be to center the content. Right, so let me go ahead and fill the frame proportionally. I'll right-click and go to Fitting, Center Content, and it will center the image. Right, so I have even space on the other side. So there it is. Right? If I wanted to make an adjustment to what's included, right, all I'd have to do is change my frame, and I get more or less image. It's kind of like an ongoing crop. Right? So I just changed the frame. Let's say it's like that. I could move the whole thing over. I could adjust this one back, etc. Okay? The other option would be to double-click, which gives me that kind of brownish color, and I could adjust the image behind, which you guys all saw me do earlier, behind the frame. Okay? So now that I have the image put in correctly, I want to put some text in. So I'm going to use the text tool, the T. I'm going to draw a box right here at the bottom. And here I would go ahead and start typing. So I'll say this is Garth Brooks, right, open fields. Something like that. I don't know, I'm making it up. Okay? Now, maybe this isn't the right size, it doesn't quite look right, so I'm going to adjust some size. So up here at the top, because I have the text tool active, right, I have the ability to change fonts. I could open up the font menu and, for example, change the font. Then I could change the size, so we can make it bigger, right, something like that. If I'm losing text, see that little plus sign shows up, not everything is there. I might have to resize my text box. There we go. There we go. So there's Garth Brooks. Maybe the text color needs to change. So if I select the text, I can come over to my color right there. Right now it's a black T. I can change the black T by double-clicking on it to be, say, white. And now, right, that would be in white, depending on what the look is that you're going for, right? Maybe this needs to change. Let me select everything and center it for a second. Let's put this to the right. Change that font to something else. We're never going to be able to see that one. Definitely not the right font. So it would probably take a little bit of time to figure out what the right one is. Sorry, since this isn't my computer, I don't know my fonts as well. We're going to talk in depth about type and typography a little bit later on in the semester, at which point I'll show you how to install custom fonts so that you can actually come up with a different look based on what you're after. Okay, let me increase the size there a little bit more. I need this a little bit like that. And maybe I like it, maybe I don't. Okay. Now let's say it had some explicit content, and I needed the parental explicit content warning. Right? Let's do a Google search. Not that Garth Brooks would have explicit content, but you get the idea, right? So I'm doing a Google search for the parental content. So let's say, something like this. Let me go ahead and view the image. There it is. Let me save the image as. And I'll put it into today's folder as well. Oh, looks like I already have it there. Let's jump back to InDesign. And so in this case, I'm just going to go to File. Let's create the frame, something like that. I'll go to File, Place. We'll find that explicit content tag. I'm going to right-click on it and say Fitting, Fill Frame Proportionally. Now I have to do a few little adjustments to it. So let's go back to the white arrow here. Do that. Something like that. And then we could drop that, oops. Onto one side, maybe, something like that. Okay. I could use his logo. So if I looked up Garth Brooks' logo, right? I could use one of his logos, something like this instead. Let's say, you know what? Let me look under Search Tools. I'm going to change the size here to be large. See if I can come up with anything. Okay, let's do the gold one. Why not? Okay, so let me go ahead and view the image. I'm going to go ahead and save the image. So let's save image as. We'll save it there. It's going to be a JPEG. and I don't want the white background. So this is a perfect opportunity to remember our skills in Photoshop. So let me jump into Photoshop. Let me go ahead and open that. I'll go to File, Open. Oops. There. Okay, I don't want the white background. I'm going to go to Select, Color Range. We'll pick the white. Say OK. And let me layer from background. Okay. And we can go ahead and delete that background so it's transparent. I can then save it as, so File, Save for Web. Remember that this needs to be a PNG right there. I'll go ahead and save. Oops, sorry. Wrong place. Save it as a PNG. There it is. And then when I bring it into here, let's get this frame first. If I hold down Shift, it can be a square, so like that. I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll drop in, which one's the PNG? This one's the PNG. And remember, right-click, Fitting, Fill Frame Proportionally. There it is. And now I have that on its background. Maybe it belongs up here. Maybe down a little bit more. Oops. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Okay? When I'm all done with my work, right, I may get to the point where I really want to see this in a full, sharp preview. If that's the case, I can right-click. I can go to Display Performance, and I can say High Quality Display. And then everything will sharpen up to be crisp instead of the blurry background. It gives us our full resolution preview, right? I can also go to View. I can go to Screen Mode and go from Normal to Preview to make all the lines go away. So there's no guidelines or anything, and I can see what it looks like there. Make sure I like it. Let's go back to my Screen Mode, Normal. And when I'm done, I'll go to File, Export. And I'm going to save not a PDF, I'm going to save a JPEG. And we'll give this a name. And here. Right? And then I'll go ahead and save. This is then the image file. So when this comes out, we want our quality to be maximum, our resolution to be 300, right? And we're going to go ahead and do just a page. We'll export. And that then is the final draft that makes a JPEG. So if we were to look at it, there it is, right? It's all fixed, right? I can't change anything. I can't edit anything anymore. That's the fixed version, just the JPEG, okay? So this is what you'll post, the JPEG. However, you should also save the InDesign file. So I'm going to go to File, Save, and we'll put this in my flash drive here. And then I'll go ahead and say Save. And that InDesign file will allow me to go back and open it, make corrections and edits and that sort of thing along the way. Okay? So today I'm asking you to do a basic CD album. You're going to have to place a few images. You'll have to do a little bit of text. And then we'll revisit multiple images, text, etc. in the coming days. All right? Any questions? No? All right, good.